three people asked me, because the seat was coming open because Harold Getty was retiring from the Ward 3 position. So I had three people approach me. Remember him, Jeff Kurtz, who was in Main Street, Tavis Hall, Chris Schwartz, together in separate conversations saying, why don't you do that? Because they knew I was a political junkie, so to speak, and they knew I was involved with human rights issues and other issues. So and they thought I'd be sort of a bulldog, which, yeah, I guess maybe I am. When I do something, I want to do it as best as I can, but when you come into something and you don't have any idea of what it is that you need to do, then to me it goes back to making sure that if I would be assigned something, that I find out what it is and then I do my homework so that I at least have some glimmer of what is expected of me and what I see as the issues. I know there's a lot of people that think that when you get elected, you're supposed to take a poll every time you make some kind of decision. Well, I don't see it that way. I see it from the perspective that I go out and I put myself out there to be elected to an office because the people are going to trust my judgment in making decisions in the best interest of not just Ward 3, but the entire city of Waterloo. So that's sort of how I approach it, and that's how I went into it basically from day one, because when I was running in 2013, one of my main focuses was on payday lender ordinance, and payday lending to me is atrocious. I think by April or May of 2014, we had passed the payday lender ordinance on a 5-2 vote. I know it took three times to get it passed, but still we got it passed. Even before that, there was an issue with the Violence Against Women Act, and the one part of that was included in the Waterloo ordinance was that said landlords cannot evict victims of domestic violence. That was the first, and I think the most significant vote of a controversy. There was a budget that was thrown in there which I didn't know anything about, and I learned as the first one is really learning, and then Michelle Wiedner is so great with being able to sit down and go over stuff. So there's a budget. Each and every year there was a budget, but those first two, that Violence Against Women Act and then the payday lender ordinance, were significant. And then one that I took some heat on was the St. Joseph Square thing, the John Rubb development there, and the parking lot that was the city's being bought out. I took some flack from that for my vote supporting John Rubb's development. So those are in that first maybe 6 to 8, 9 months, the ones that I really remember. I see the role I have as a microcosm of what U.S. Congress and what state legislature is. The City Council is a legislative body for our municipality. The mayor and his administration, he's the executive branch. Then we use the legal department and then the Blackhawk County judicial law enforcement system with the Waterloo Police. So we got three branches of government. And since I've been on council, and I'm not going to take credit for this, but what I've seen is a minimizing and a diminishing of the role of city council in that three-part government. The rules of procedure, to me, were the coup de grace to that diminishing. Because if you just look at what we do now and what is happening now with the elimination of standing committees, the elimination of 4 meetings a month, which I never had any problem with 4 meetings a month. Matter of fact, when I started, Ed, we had Thursday morning agenda meetings that we went to. I never missed any of them because I thought they were that important for me to get a heads up on what the department, what the mayor was talking about on our agenda. They took that away, you know, and now they've taken away the 4 meetings a month, and we only have 2 meetings a month. And much more is being put on the consent agenda, where you have to take it off the consent agenda if you want to have it discussed. So that's the part that I see that is negative. The positive part continues to be, if you do your homework and if you pay attention to things that you see as important, maybe other people on council don't see them with that same kind of importance, but you can make it a public issue. And one of the ones that happened within that first 2 years was the Wonder Bread building. I don't know if you remember, they wanted to raise that. And and then they talked about leaving up part of the wall as a facade for whatever they were going to do. That didn't stand, and I was very happy to lead the charge on that, Ed, and to have it so that the Wonder Bread, with the help of Jessica Young, she reached out and she found and she got the interest of Dave Morgan to come in there and save the Wonder Bread building. And look what a great venue that is right now for downtown Waterloo. Historic preservation is a biggie. If anything, I hope that somebody comes up and saves the Dunsmore House. We've got history in Waterloo that has been just demolished, tore under. Kleinfelder Building, Paramount Theater, just to name a few. The old Bickley mansion over on Clay Street, and those are things that should have never happened in a city. Being the liaison on the Historic Preservation Commission, I firmly believe that the Historic Preservation Commission needs to be its own separate department with its own separate funding in order to save the structures, the history, because there's 3 parts to historic designation, not just the structural part. There's a cultural and there's a personal history part that goes along with that. Waterloo's got more than its share of that stuff, Ed. The Fair Chance Initiative, originally called Ban the Box, I was on that from the second year I was on council, trying to promote that and get that thing going. And unfortunately, it got put with some other thing, and both of them got turned down. But kept pushing, and so now we've got Ban the Box, or Fair Chance ordinance here in the city of Waterloo. Bicycle ordinance, that's another one that I'm very happy that I helped get going. The Urban Animal Hobby Farm, I pushed to get that going there and get that set up, which we now have. Complete Streets over there on Park is another one. I pushed to have something like that set up, and we got it now. Yeah, there's a lot of people who think, wow, this is really ugly. Well, if you're a bicyclist and a pedestrian, it's not ugly. Mohammed Elahi has been great with that, and I see that there's some new signalization going up there. Bicycle trails in our leisure services recreation. I was glad to be part of Sportsplex voting to make sure that went in. I was glad to see that we've had additional trails, and where we're at that last stage of having the Shawless Road recreation trail go up. And I don't know if people realize that, but when that last section, which is going to be the most difficult one, that has to go over, I hope it goes over like the Cedar Falls Mayor's Bridge, go over 218, that will make Waterloo having one of the biggest loops for any metropolitan municipal area in the entire Midwest. And it would also include, if you wanted to even make it longer, you could go all the way up into Cedar Falls and come all the way back around. And you could have a loop, and you don't even have to leave Waterloo and Cedar Falls. That's how cool that kind of stuff is. So I've been very happy to do that. I got other things that I wanted to do, but 8 years is enough. Well, there's people that believe in compromise, and there's people that don't believe in compromise until that's the only thing you got left. But if you can't get enough support for the idea you have to get to the point where you can compromise, then it's quick because you're done, because you don't get support. But if you can get some support and you can keep working at it, unless you've got, you know, a majority vote right off the bat, which with the payday lender ordinance, I was so surprised that I had basically 5 votes within probably 2 months. And then there was some compromise back and forth because something was taken away from that. And then it succeeded surprisingly fast, whereas Fair Chance took forever, you know, but it got done. One of the ones that's been so disappointing is the Racial Equity Social Justice Review. I have no idea why that's not an ordinance. I prepared an ordinance, gave it to City Council back in August of 20, gave it to the administration back then, and it just sits there and nothing's happening. You know, that's frustrating. And, you know, if I can veer into something that was very controversial recently, and that is the whole idea of the patch and the change of the patch. Well, in June of 20 is when I presented a prepared statement after George Floyd's murder and that, and what I felt the City Council should discuss, and it included that patch based upon the information that I had been given by members of our community that were affected by it, and members of our community who were not of the same persuasion as far as skin color, who confirmed that with me, and that made that change all the much more relevant as a need to get done, if for nothing else but out of respect for members of our African American community. So that took, and that process has been sort of, it just got nasty, and it didn't need to get nasty, in my opinion. And I hope that there are other issues that were brought up by me back in June of 20 that can be further addressed by the ongoing council, which I think the new council coming in is going to have a lot of issues in front of them, Ed, that they're going to have to deal with, and budgetary items are going to be a biggie, because what do you do when the state legislature eliminates the state replacement, fund that is gradually disappearing because of the legislation that they passed? And so budget's a big issue, and I know you probably remembered that the last 4 years, 5 years maybe it was, I've submitted counter budgets to the mayors. I really haven't voted for any of the mayor's budgets because I think that mine are better, but none of them. I got 2 votes one time. Do your homework and know the issues that are there. Some of the stuff on the council agenda is matter of fact budget kind of stuff from a budget that's already been passed, that you're okay in, that the money be used this way. But know those public hearing items, know those resolutions, and know the other business part of it, and the ordinance part of it, inside and out, so that you can answer questions for your ward and for the entire city. Because if you don't do your homework, I know that at one time I was called a rubber stamp. I've never been a rubber stamp. And you're not a rubber stamp if you do your homework. And I don't want any of the new members to ever be called a rubber stamp. Well, I'm going to take a breather for a while, and I'm on some boards that I've been on for a long time, and I'm probably going to leave those boards. But like the meeting I just came from, Ed, the dilapidated housing meeting, I've loved those meetings. I think they're great, and they're part, I think, and parcel of anybody who's going to be a liaison with the Historic Preservation Commission, because it is an issue. How the housing stock in Waterloo is growing older, just like any other community, but I don't think we really have a housing program outside of community development, and then having the Habitat for Humanity or maybe JSA step in. There needs to be more than that. There needs to be more of a taxpayer city investment into saving our historic structures and saving the structures from having to have the city come in at 6:57 a.m. and spend all that money taking care of that when it doesn't need to be that way if we had a housing program. How much money do we invest in demolition? And there's more to demolition just than to going in and getting the contract to demolish, because you got to do the survey, you got to do the asbestos part of it. So if somebody thinks that I'm going to demo this house for $10,000, there's more dollars that go into that. It could be 20, 30,000. If we save that money, if we took all that money that is used for that and invested in a housing program that would take care of these properties from the aging out people that are slipping through the cracks because they're above community development guidelines, but they're below the ability to pay for it, we could save a lot of our older housing stock by restoring, rehabilitating them, and letting them go into the future without having becoming a liability for the taxpayers. Historic preservation I love complete streets. I love dilapidated housing. I love the Human Rights Commission and component, and I'm sort of outspoken in that. And I've been on all those for the entire time I've been on council, and it's going to be hard leaving those. It's going to be hard not doing what I do. It's going to be hard not having a voice sitting up here and being able to say it publicly without any reservation. And I think I've been very courteous and very polite for the most part, and I've not been. Some people say, well, you're not very civil. And I said, what are you talking about? I believe I'm probably one of the more civil people on city council. It's just that if I disagree with something, I'm going to let people know it. Just because you disagree doesn't mean that you're not civil, you know. So I'm going to miss that part of it immensely, because I have really loved being on city council. I really have.